So yesterday, I think it was the first presentation, Heather, Mo kicked it off, and I was very jealous. She gets to hang out with the cool Mr. Robot style security, hacker kids. And there's got one guy in the audience that does it, I guess, even more. Luiz Eduardo dos Santos.
Morning, everyone. Morning. I apologize in advance. We're using the old slide deck that I had an updated one, so I'll try to remember everything that I was going to tell you and not go over the time. Speaking of Mr. Robot, if I do not remember throughout the presentation to tell you a funny story about that, please remind me at the end. And let's start with a quick exercise. Not going to ask you to stand up, look at your neighbor, and sing a famous song. That was 2 days ago. Just take a deep breath. Let's be all present here. So 1, 2, 3. OK, good. So thanks, CWNP, for having me here, accepting my talk. The goal is for you to apply this somehow. Some of the things that we did for the implementation of the network I'm talking about, it looks good on paper. People really like talking about that. We talk to the customers about that. But sometimes we just don't implement that. So let me try to make this work. There we go. So who the hell is this guy here? I am actually a technical director for a company called Uptake, a data analytics company based out of Chicago. I am actually in data operations. I am a manager. I've been a manager for about 6 years now. I'm a manager for information security operations. So I am an InfoSec guy with a Wi-Fi problem, if you will. Back in the day, that's in the next slide, or maybe not, because it's still DAC. Back in the day, I used to be a pre- and post-sales engineer for different wireless companies. I started working with wireless at Aruba back in 2004. That's around the time that, or then 2005, I got my CWNE, so I'm CWNE 24. And then I took a break, went to InfoSec, and then went back to Wi-Fi, worked for Ruckus for a while. And so my technical background is Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is what I like, but InfoSec is also something that I like a lot. Mostly because I help with a whole bunch, like a handful of conferences here in the US and other places. I run the network team at Defcon, which is a hacker conference, right after Black Hat. If you saw Heather's presentation yesterday, she told you all about Black Hat. It happens in the same week. It's the hacker summer camp, as we call, right? Everybody goes to Vegas, everybody wearing the black shirt and doing their own thing. But I also run the network team at a conference called ShmooCon in Washington, DC, in the middle of the winter, always fun. And I do other stuff for other conferences. On top of it, I am an organizer for a conference in Brazil called You Shot the Sheriff, not I Shot the Sheriff, it's You Shot the Sheriff. We had our 11th or 10th year on that conference. It is an InfoSec conference. And in the past, I presented mostly in InfoSec conferences, hacker conferences, talking about in-flight Wi-Fi, but I'm not that guy who said the plane did that. It wasn't me. MDNS privacy and other stuff. So what is this talk about? So I'm going to talk about building the network for Defcon. Who here knows what Defcon or heard of Defcon? Just show of hands so I have an idea and don't bother you with that. Defcon is the largest hacker conference in the planet. It's about, they had their 25th year this past July. It was about 27 or 26,000 attendees. And lots of people that go to Black Hat, they roll in and go to Defcon. But because of the difference of price, I think that's one of the factors that drive most of the black shirt hackers, Mr. Robot-ish folks to go there, because Defcon is about $250 to get in. Black Hat is a couple $1,000. That's kind of that goes. So what is this talk about? It's how I implemented what, I hate this term, but best practices, right, to build a network in 3 days. That's what we do. So enterprise class is what we try to use in companies or sell to our customers, if you're a vendor. Hostile environment, arguably Defcon. There were articles in the past saying that they will, people try to do whatever with the network, and that's very true. And for guest access, because all the attendees need Wi-Fi, right? It's becoming less and less because of LTE and all that stuff and the little hotspots, but that's what that is. So the old, how do I go back here? Just 1 second. You threw me off a bit. Okay, so let me tell you this story. Back in 2005, Jeff Moss, who's the guy who runs Defcon, and at the time he was running Black Hat too before he sold to UBM. He approached us. I was going to Defcon for about 3-4 years at the time. And he approached us and he said, well, the network does not work. Defcon was hosted at a very small hotel off the strip because they got kicked out from every single hotel they tried to do that, or they had the conference before. So it was a hotel, very small, across the street from the Hard Rock, if you know Vegas. No casinos and nothing like that. And they had like homegrown solutions. So kind of the deal was, he said, if you guys can make the network work for more than 4 hours, that's great, because we were unable to do that. Second, he said, if you make it work throughout the conference, maybe Defcon will, for the first time in life, buy an enterprise-grade solution. So, long story short, it worked, right? You can Google articles about that. Jeff gave a pretty nice endorsement at the time, saying that everything worked. But the problem is that at that time, I was also doing the network at Black Hat, or the wireless network for Black Hat. So that was a very long week for me, because of bouncing from a place to another. But what were the old requirements for Wi-Fi in general back in 2005-ish, right? Availability, very important. So that was one of the requirements. Things really didn't work the way people expected, especially at a hacker conference, right? If you have an open SSID and packet injection and throwing bad pictures at people's laptops and things like that, that was very common. But availability, very important. Reliability, we didn't have, or we didn't have any type of like major services. Was mostly for guest access, but they couldn't really make it work. But the major thing here is to protect the infrastructure, right? What is behind the APs? People really try to mess with the network. That's what Defcon is. Also, like what Heather was saying yesterday, right? Sometimes people unplug stuff from the wall, and they do that all the time, more often than we wanted to. Also, people try to steal access points. So AP placement is a challenge that we have. Still a challenge these days, especially when we change venues, hotels. If you worked in Vegas with your customers, you know that some places they're union hotels, so you cannot touch anything. So you say, I need the access point there, and the antenna has to look like this. And then you walk in, like hours later, you're like, not that. So they have to go fix it. So planning is very important for us. And one thing that we did was to minimize the attack surface. What do I mean by that? Was to, and I hope I have that slide, is we have many VLAN, not many, many VLANs and some ESSIDs. So I was laughing when Keith was presenting yesterday that people confuse VLAN with ESSID or ESSID with VLAN. We would throw people off, right? Because we have mostly 2 ESSIDs these days, and we have tons of VLANs. Let's see if I have something here talking about that. So let me talk about that. I don't think I have that slide. Really apologize for that. So what we do, we have a management VLAN for the APs to talk to the controller. We use the Aruba solution still. And we have every AP has mostly, it depends on what happens. Sometimes people want to do the capture the flag, one of the contests through the wireless, so we create a separate ESSID. But for every single ESSID, every AP has a different VLAN for that ESSID. So that way, if somebody causes some sort of exhaustion attack or any type of attack on that AP, that will be contained to that specific VLAN. It doesn't solve the problem, but it minimizes a little bit. And we see all kinds of attacks, as you can imagine. Some of the old challenges that some are still real is coverage, capacity. The first time that we did this, it was at that hotel and off the strip, and Defcon had about 4,000 attendees. Now it has 26,000, 27,000. AP placement, very important. As I said, from stealing to really not being able to put APs wherever you want. So we do planning. We use some of the predictive RF tools to plan that when we first go to a hotel before we know what's going on. But it's sometimes like, oh, I want an AP here. They're like, nope, no can do. And sometimes especially in the older hotels, the backhaul, the infrastructure is pretty old. So sometimes the Ethernet jacks are like at the bottom of the floor. So you're like, I don't want people unplugging, but people look, oh, there's an AP and there's a oh, that's the port that I'm gonna go mess with. And they do that. And back in the day, wireless compatibility issues. But that was not a big problem because the requirement was, back to the requirements, availability, reliability. So we said what we're gonna do for authentication, encryption, all that stuff. Like if we use some sort of static pre-shared key kind of thing, well, might as well just do it open, and we did. So we had an open ESSID, and it was the Wild West, right? That's, the network worked, it stood well, had obviously a few problems, especially when we go to a new venue, it's always a challenge. I wish I had the pictures here, but I'll, at the end, remind me to give you a link. You can see some very funny pictures, right? When we were at the Riviera Hotel, that was actually, it turned out to be one of the best places for us in terms of like AP placement and security of the APs, because they had this catwalk. So we had one of the bigger controllers that provided PoE. So we just said, you know what, just put the controller on top of on the catwalk and then just run the APs from the controller. And that was awesome. So you can, like, the article is on Wired. You can see like the controller hanging and like cables all over the place, but people couldn't really get to the APs. That was like fantastic. What else? So we did that for a few years. And then in 2010, Jeff said, well, we need to provide some sort of security for the users. Defcon is no longer this kind of like small hacker gathering kind of thing. People from different backgrounds and such, they go to the conference, and we want to provide some sort of security for them. So obviously, especially at that time, there was no MDM or something like that, and we do not want, and I'm sure attendees would not want us to have any type of control over their devices. What we did, we created a registration on a web server that people can go in a couple days before the conference, create their credentials, download the cert, and off you go, right? Problems with that, so we consider 802.1x using PEEP. We've been using client isolation since the beginning. There were people complained that I cannot make one thing talk to another, but we don't care. In segmentation, that's what I talked before, right? A couple ESSIDs and many, many VLANs. The network, well, I'll talk about that when we get to the diagram. So challenges that were introduced is that 802.1x can be hard. And not a lot of people understood 802.1x, and people still do not understand 802.1x sometimes. But configuring the radio server, pretty easy, right? We use free radius. Endpoint compatibility. At that time, certain phones, right? People start having smartphones, and certain flavors of what have you, right? Wouldn't do PEEP or import the cert, or people freak out depending on the thing. Verification of the cert, big problem. Even like you expect people that go to a security/hacker conference to, yes, I really want to validate that cert. No, they're like, oh, it doesn't work, I'll just uncheck this box. Bad on them. Band allocation. At that time, the systems were not as smart as they are now. So we chose to, I think we actually had like one SSID for 5 gigahertz, one for 2.4. We changed that recently with like the beam steering or whatever terminology the vendors use these days. And roaming was like with the open Wi-Fi, with the open SSID, was not too bad with 802.1x. So clients would stick to one AP, and people complain that Wi-Fi doesn't work, right? As somebody said yesterday. And so the trick we did was, and I saw in one of the presentations here yesterday, glad like this people kind of do that, but we were doing that back then, was to like kill the lower rates, right? And have the AP kick that client and let the client find another AP. Coverage was good. Obviously, we have certain capacity problems sometimes, but it's part for the course. So the network, this is kind of what it looks like. The laser. So the goal, what we do, is not only Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is one subset, a very important one, that we do for the conference. So we have many APs throughout the hotel. They collapse on a switch. They go through the IDFs and all those good things. The recent hotels, pretty awesome. They've been good. The infrastructure is new. Some of the old ones, like Riviera, we had cabling problems, like that were like nightmares to troubleshoot. I remember like this one AP would never, like you plug that AP, it doesn't work, or one of the APs was not working. After some troubleshooting, we found out that when we plugged on that switch another AP, it would kill the AP on the port before that one. So that troubleshooting that was like, what's happening? I'm like, it's bad cable. So we fixed that. So the APs go to the switch, talk to the controller. Controller is on the MDF. This is a core switch. We have a firewall. It's a FreeBSD firewall. Another important part of the design, I talked a lot about the VLANs. Everything goes layer 2 to the firewall. All termination for all VLANs is on the firewall. There are things that, not many, but there are certain things that need to talk to each other. They go all the way up to the firewall, right? So 802.11 to the controller, right? GRE, pop GRE, put on the VLAN, send to the firewall, and off they go. We have some servers, different types of servers for different services. There's a box that we call the media server. That's a repository of all the talks, all the documents, everything that from Defcon 1, whatever they had, up to now. So people go to the conference, they want to download everything, have all the content. They go to this media server. Obviously, it's one of the things that have most traffic. This is a 10 gig backbone, by the way. And our internet uplink is sad, is very sad. I have a slide talking about that. We also do something called DCTV, Defcon TV. We stream the talks to the hotel rooms. So that's also part of what we do. We're responsible for going from the camera to some sort of converter that goes to the TV head end, and people can be hungover and watch the talks from their room. Or if the rooms get too full, that's another option there. And this past year, for the first time, actually, we streamed to different hotels of the same chain, which was nice, but also introduced some fun stuff. Because the time constraint it's something that we do. We also provide a network for the speakers, so every podium has a wired port. They do something also called Defcon. It is for people with hearing impairment, so they have like closed caption. So these people have to type really fast and like make stuff show there. So we provide like services for pretty much everything, media, and so on. So this is what we have on the wired side, a 10 gig backbone. We use the Cisco stuff, Cisco switch. We had one core switch, but we had a code standby, just in case. Didn't have to use it, that's good. Our trusty FreeBSD firewall, being using that. I think we upgraded the hardware maybe 3 years ago. It goes strong, and a whole bunch of Cisco switches throughout the floor for many things. And we also have like very small like Netgear switches for like, somebody says, I need internet. Okay, how many ports? Oh, I need 12 ports. Give one small switch and done. On the wireless, we got upgraded. Well, last year we got a new controller. And this, thanks to Aruba, by the way. And this year we got new APs. We were still running. We had some of the newer models that were donations to us. But for the most part, we had, if you're familiar with Aruba, we had a bunch of AP70s. And they're like yellow and ugly at this point, although they're used once a year. So we fixed that. The human gear, so the network team has 12 people. We have 2 people, so I run the network with another fellow called Mac. We have 2 people doing the Wi-Fi. One of them, the lead for the wireless, he's actually a CCIE wireless, so it's fun for him to work on the Aruba stuff. I think he's learning some Aruba as I speak. He was supposed to be here, but he said he had to go somewhere. We have 2 people for the Defcon TV. We have then people that pulling cables. That's something that we can do. So sometimes you see a whole bunch of like cable, like this one here, cables and gaff tape. There's a lot of walking and exercise that go in there. This is kind of the timeline that we have. So we do a lot of planning. As you can imagine, time is very constrained. We do planning throughout the year, what went wrong. We do a post-mortem every year, what didn't work, what kind of attacks we got. We pre-stage a lot of the stuff. And we roll in on Sunday. We got the internet up. We got the major services, the core services up, firewall, the Aruba controller. And then Monday, we hit the ground and we hang APs, get DCTV set up, the Wi-Fi reg. So we prepare that box, but it lives there. It doesn't live in the cloud. So we have to do a bunch of stuff and DNS. And as you can imagine, like the defcon.org web server is attacked more than probably anything on earth. We had this year on Tuesday to create the site-to-site VPN to the different hotels to send DCTV, the DCTV feed there. We set up some network monitoring. We don't have a fancy NOC at all. All the gear is not there. We don't have much. It's pretty much make it work. It's not a showcase we hide. You cannot find us. If you go to DEFCON, you will probably not see me. My friends are never too happy with that. And on Wednesday, for the first time, we were done on Wednesday. Everything was set up. We went to a nice dinner. And then when it's Thursday, we get, obviously, the last-minute requests from vendors, from contests, and so on. And for the most part, it worked. So on Sunday, after the closing ceremony, so the conference starts on Thursday. On Sunday, it's done around 4 p.m., 5 p.m. We start tearing down. Monday, we pack everything and go home. So it's a very fast week for us. Speaking of the vendors, I think I have on the challenges. So today's challenges. 802.1x is still hard to understand. It's, oh, I didn't put that there. That's too bad. So some people, for not us here, not you, people don't understand 802.1x. Even for a security conference, you expect people to understand how it works. No, it doesn't. So we explain, do not use, when you create your credentials, do not use your domain credentials, right? People did that, and then they chose not to validate the server. And it was like, oh, my credentials got compromised. Like, do not use, we had to put like, in large letters, do not use your company's credentials for this, or your bank, or what have you. PEEP is still not 100% proof. Like if you have certain flavors of Androids, it got better in the past 2 years, but 3 years ago was a nightmare, right? The iOS stuff worked fine. Android, couldn't get it to work. 2 years ago, so last year and this year, everything worked okay. And the verification of the cert, right? Some Chromebooks and things like that, they don't like cert validation. Don't ask me why. And another challenge that I had a picture here is that, so I guess, and Heather also mentioned that yesterday, the pineapple. Everybody knows what the pineapple is from Hack 5, right? Good? You guys know or no? If you don't know, raise your hand. Okay. If you're sleeping, keep. The pineapple is a device that is like a weaponized kind of device that has all the wireless attacking tools that you can imagine. Has a nice GUI interface. So you buy that, and you are a super Mr. Robot, Wi-Fi hacker attacker, right? One of the things is that, guess who one of the major vendors inside Defcon is? Hack 5. So how many pineapples do we see? A lot, because everybody buys their new shiny hacker thing, and they will fire that up. Oh, there's a SSID, and let me attack that. So good times. The slides are going to be available, and this is kind of interesting. Numbers, I'm not going to go through them. But there's a lot of like way less Mac spoofing than in the past. But DHCP, like people still find fun to, like, oh, it's fun to try to exhaust the DHCP server. So we have like very large networks because of that. So people get tired and go do something else. They're like, oh yeah, I'm going to break the network. That's what people like to do, whatever. Some other stats. So we have 2 ESSIDs. We still have the open ESSID. Don't know why, but people use it. It's like, okay. And we have the Defcon ESSIDs, the 802.1x WPA2. Some interesting things, I think it's on the other slide as well, but you see the traffic, obviously BitTorrent, OpenVPN and IPsec, that's a good thing, right? The Facebooks, everybody needs their Facebooks. Kali, Google Drive, lots of sharing there, right? The DC media server, that's the most traffic that we get, people downloading presentations, the videos of the talks from previous years. And I think the next one is the funny one. Yes. Anybody see something interesting here? Or more than one thing? No? Who goes to a hacker conference and runs your update there? That's not the update that you want. In this case, it looked legit, right? But just the, oh yes, install this update. Sure, why not, right? Granted, people bring what they call burners from phones to laptops, right? They bring it, and once it's back, it's like, done. I'm not using this. We're cool. So kind of the takeaways here, right? And this applies for everything, but especially in this kind of hacker conference environment, is set the right expectation. What is secure? There's nothing that is 100% secure, but what kind of security do you expect? What do you want? Goes back to what I did back in the day, right? I'm like, this is a hacker conference. You should know what you're doing. This is an open network. Use your VPN. Do whatever you have to do to protect yourself, or just don't bring your laptop, right? That's another good idea too. Planning is key. We do a lot of emails. We have a few phone calls, but planning on like, is there a new contest? Do they require wireless? If so, is that in a specific location or throughout the conference? Usually the answer is throughout the conference. So more VLANs and so on and so forth. And something will go wrong. We had many things. I told you about the PoE problem. We had people unplug ports and get to the controller, and they're like, we hacked your network. It's like, what did you do? Oh, I unplugged that AP and plugged it in, and I can see your controller. I'm like, can you get in the controller? Like, no, but I see the login page. Like, yeah, that's how it's supposed to work, right? We can put like firewall policies or whatever type of policies not to allow that to happen, but we didn't. And stuff breaks. A few years ago, there was a bug. It was either Windows or the iPads. This is like probably 5 years ago. That it didn't really like the cert that we were using. So we're like, this is the fingerprint of the cert, this is the cert, this is the cert ID, and only download this one. When it says do not trust, you say trust, but only if it's this one. Guess what? People just, oh, I have Windows, and I'll uncheck this box. And then people, oh, we hacked because we created a fake SSID with a fake rogue radius server, and people were connecting to us. Yeah? What can we do? So that's what I had. I finished about 8 minutes ahead of time. So I'd like to hear some questions, or can tell stories. Start there. So this is a controller-based Wi-Fi network, right? So everything is done on the controller, but what I can say is APA has ESSID Defcon and Defcon Open. For this AP, Defcon Open is VLAN 100, Defcon Secure, VLAN 200. APB has Defcon Open, Defcon Secure. For this APB, Defcon Open is VLAN 300 and VLAN 400 for the Defcon Secure, and so on and so forth. So you just get that and multiply by 70, give or take. Depends on the, officially we have 2 ESSIDs, sometimes we have more. Depending on, like this past year we didn't have that, but we had a contest the year before that they're like, we really want to use the wireless network. So that was then another 70 VLANs. Every speaker podium has a VLAN, different VLAN, and every different thing, every vendor has, every port is a different VLAN. That's kind of the VLAN situation. So I would say a couple hundred VLANs. Anybody else? Is there any concern about layer 3 mobility? The question was, are we concerned about layer 3 mobility? Yes. And I do not remember if we have any of the fancy stuff turned on for that to happen. What I can tell you is nobody complained about that, other than the usual, like, it doesn't work for me. But it's more, it's not like, oh, it's spotty, oh, I don't, it does, like, I'm connected, I moved, it doesn't work. It really works. To be totally honest with you, my email is there. Shoot me an email, I can look that up. But I do not think we have anything very fancy about that. Like, yes, there is, like, if you look at the diagram, right, everything goes to the firewall and stuff like that. Never really had problems.
Did you have port security turned on the switch?
Question is, do we have port security turned on the switch? Yes, we do. We have to.
What were you using for DHCP lease timers when you're expecting something after?
Question was, what we use for the HCP lease timers? I think it is 8 hours. Yeah. So to mitigate the DHCP exhaustion, what we do, we create very, very large subnets. That's what we do. Anybody else? Oh, thank you. So, and you guys can do this. How many people are flying out today? Who does not live here? Okay, so try this on the airplane. It's not going to get you arrested or anything like that. In the middle of the flight, and it's even better if you get that upgrade, that you have like some bigwig sitting next to you. He's on his laptop, right, doing his like Excel stuff and answering emails. Turn on your computer and run TCP dump and keep watching TV. People freak out, right? Because they see like the packages like, and you're not touching your computer, like, what is that? It's like, so it's cool because being a security professional, it's cool that Mr. Robot brought some awareness to the general public of stuff that is possible, but it's kind of funny. Anybody else? I think that's it. Thanks so much.